Sara Snow with another episode of Refreshed. Now here at Refreshed, I'm on a mission to help you make real food, but I totally know how easy it is to fall into a food rut, particularly with young picky eaters at home. So if you have fallen into the box macaroni food rut, let me at least help you break out of the box. I'm going to show you real food, real simple, homemade macaroni. Started with our macaroni, the first thing we need is 3 tablespoons of butter. We're just going to let that melt. Okay, once my butter has melted a little bit, I'm adding to it 3 tablespoons of flour. And I really want to whisk this in. I used a whole wheat flour, which is why it's got a slightly brown tinge to it. If you use a plain standard bleached flour, you don't want it to turn brown because that would mean that it has burned a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to add to that 2 cups of milk in a nice steady stream, continuing to whisk. And I'll bring that to just a slight boil, more like a simmer, before I add in my seasonings and my cheese. I'm going to cover this for just a minute so that it can come to a nice light boil. Now in the meantime, I have cooked 1.5 cups of macaroni noodles. Cook it according to the package directions, but you want it to be still slightly firm, definitely not mushy, because remember this macaroni and cheese is still going to go into the oven and cook for a little bit longer. After your macaroni has cooked, rinse it in some cold water to stop the cooking process, and then simply set it aside. The process of making macaroni from scratch takes about 10 minutes. While your pasta cooks, you cook your sauce. When your sauce is done, your pasta is done, you stir it all together, and then you put it into your greased baking dish, pop it in the oven, and dinner is ready in no time flat. All right, my milk, butter, and flour mixture is starting to heat up really nicely. I've got it to just a light simmer, definitely not a boil, and you want to make sure you whisk it frequently so it doesn't have a chance to burn. I'm going to add some seasonings into this. A teaspoon of dried mustard. I'll also add 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and just a dash of pepper. Turning my burner down a bit because I want to keep this at a simmer, keep it nice and hot, keep it cooking definitely, but I don't want it to burn. Believe it or not, this dish is almost finished. Now we're adding in 1.5 cups of cheddar cheese. This is a finely grated cheddar cheese. Just pour that in. And 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. My recipe calls for a full cup of Parmesan cheese, but I'm reserving half of it for the topping. Now remember, my cheese sauce is taking on a slightly tan color, but that's because I used a whole wheat flour. If that bothers you for any reason, go ahead with a white bleached flour, but I of course want to make everything a little bit healthier, so I'm going with a whole wheat flour. Now that looks great, and it's done. Okay, I'm getting rid of a couple of my dirty dishes because I'm ready to assemble the macaroni. That was quick. You had no idea this was going to be this easy, did you? So my sauce is finished. I'm going to add to it my already cooked pasta. This was, of course, remember, 1.5 cups of macaroni. Cooked to perfection, but slightly al dente. I'll stir that all together here. Now, one nice thing about this recipe is it's easily doubled or even tripled. This is a recipe that I make a lot of times for friends who have just had babies, anyone who needs comfort food. You can, of course, make it with all organic ingredients, organic pasta, which means the wheat or whatever grain was grown organically along with the other ingredients. And then, of course, organic cheese, organic milk, organic butter, organic flour, all of those things. So it's a very healthy dish, albeit somewhat rich and definitely in the comfort food category. Now this is all mixed together. I'm going to set that aside and bring my baking dish over. My recipe generally calls for an 8-inch square baking dish, and this is essentially the same thing. It's a different shape, but it's the same amount of volume. So I'm adding my macaroni mixture, or I'm just pouring it into my baking dish. Now, To top it off in a slightly different way and to make it a little bit more refreshed, I like to add a little bit of vegetable. And to this dish, I think it's beautiful, also tasty, it adds a brightness to add some thinly sliced tomatoes on top. So I'm taking a couple small tomatoes, I'm just going to slice them paper thin and layer them across the top. I'm using smaller tomatoes, smaller than aroma even, so I'm using 3. And the final step is to take a cup of breadcrumbs and mix in that final ½ cup of Parmesan cheese. I sprinkle my breadcrumbs mixture right over the top of the macaroni. I'm putting the majority of it on first, and then I'm going to top it with the tomatoes and put the last little bit over top of the tomatoes. This is going to give it a nice crunchy topping on that macaroni. It's just a nice change. Standard store-bought macaroni, boxed macaroni, is creamy and lovely, but it's all that one consistency. This gives it a little bit of crunch, and then the tomatoes give it a little bit of brightness. Okay, with my tomatoes over the top, I sprinkle the last little bit of those breadcrumbs right over top of that. Looks so nice. This entire thing took 10, maybe max 20 minutes to assemble. And that was with gathering the ingredients. This is going to go into the 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. Now remember, the nice thing about this is you can assemble multiples at a time. You can double or triple the recipe. They also freeze really well. So stop at this point, wrap it in tin foil and maybe a little bit of plastic, and attach a nice little note that tells someone they should pop it in a 350-degree oven for 30 to 40 minutes to defrost and then also heat up that macaroni mixture. This one's going in the oven and it'll be ready for dinner tonight. 30 minutes in the oven and this dish is ready to come out. Look at that, all that oozy, bubbly yumminess around the edges there. So much better than boxed macaroni and cheese, don't you agree? Really, really simple. It took all of about 20 minutes to assemble this, and then I popped it in the oven. During that time, you can be prepping the kids' lunches for the next day, whatever you need to do. You will have dinner on the table in about 40-45 minutes. Super, super quick. Look at that. Beautiful and delicious. This is a macaroni and cheese recipe that anyone in your family will love. Now there you have it. Serve that alongside some steamed broccoli or a mixed green salad, and you have dinner for the whole family. I certainly hope you all enjoy.